Hello and welcome to the first of the series of webinars for you guys in the coaching program at DHPT. So we have a guest to come and speak tonight in the form of Roz Williams. So Roz is a practicing business psychologist. She's worked in big organizations as well as kind of like one-to-one in terms of implementing like health and well-being strategies within a business setting. So I thought she would be the perfect person to come on board and talk to us about like a holistic approach when it comes to implementing health and well-being, and about how it's not just about like training and diet. It's all about how to implement the management of stress as well as sleep and all these different areas that are obviously going to affect us psychologically. And at the end of the day, the best program in the world isn't going to work if you can't keep to it and if you completely lose your head because there is different challenges in there. Then it doesn't matter how perfect the plan is. If you can't do it, you just can't do it. So that's enough of me waffling on, and we'll hand over to the very talented Roz and let her take over from here. So I'm just going to mute myself. If you need me at any point, just say and I'll unmute myself.
That's lovely. What an introduction, and thank you for having me to speak this evening. It's lovely to be here. And as Donald said, I'm here tonight, and really I wanted to talk to you about about behaviour change and how we make that behaviour change sustainable over time. So really looking at mindset particularly. So to me, mindset is those thoughts and habits that we have that shape our behaviour. And in the main, I wanted to cover three things with you. And we've not got a huge amount of time, so I really wanted to focus on three things that I think really make a difference to my clients, and things that you can hopefully take away and think about and work out think about for yourselves, and also with Donald as part of your coaching, perhaps. So firstly, I'd like to talk a little bit about motivation, because that's kind of where everything begins. And I think quite often we will go into a health program, a fitness program, or a diet, or something to relieve stress, not blasé, but without really any true understanding of what that's going to involve. So we might perhaps think, yeah, I want to get fit because I'm going on holiday in 6 months' time, and it would be lovely. But we don't really think too much about what that's going to entail and how we're going to keep on that pathway. So motivation is where I wanted to start. Then I wanted to move on to the unhelpful thinking patterns that we can quite often experience, which can really derail us when we're trying to achieve our goals. And then finally end with a few strategies which I hope will help keep you focused as you work towards achieving whatever it is that you want to achieve. So to start with motivation, the first thing I want to say is that to improve is to change. We can't improve our fitness or our diet if we don't change something. But it's really important that we understand our own motivation for change and make sure that we have the right things in place to help us if our motivation sits more on a kind of desire for gain or fear of loss level. Because motivation in itself, I feel, is on a continuum. So at one end, we have this holy grail of what we call intrinsic motivation. So this is where we do something like exercise because we think it's really fun, or we find it interesting how far we can push our bodies, or we just like a challenge. We just like seeing that we can achieve something day on day. I have to say that's totally not where I am with exercise, unfortunately. I wish I was, but I do tend to sit at the other end. So I'll flip between exercising because I want to gain something, so I want to feel good on holiday, or literally because I can't do my trousers up at the moment. Or it may be a fear of loss. So sometimes it will pop in my head that, well, if I'm getting a bit overweight or I'm at risk of health problems, then I might not be able to run around with my future grandchildren when they eventually do arrive, which are all great reasons for change. But when we look at the research, it does show that they're not as sustainable as the more intrinsic motivation. So actually feeling excited about what you're doing just for doing it for its own sake. But the really good news is, even if we sit on that desire for gain, fear of loss at end of the continuum, we can move from one end to the other if we have the right elements in place. And so you've all got your wonderful personal trainer there, and he'll actually be providing you with some of the things that you need already. So some of those things you'll need to move from one end of the scale to the other. So the first part of that is relatedness, and that's just basically relationships. So that's where you feel like you're part of a group and where you know that you're working towards something and that you're not alone in your journey. I know you have your Facebook group and Donald does various things with you to keep you all engaged and supported, and that's a really, really valuable part of moving towards that intrinsic motivation side of the scale. And then the second element is competency. So having the knowledge in yourself that you can achieve your goal. And you can get that knowledge in a couple of ways, generally from feedback and praise. You might get it from family and friends or work colleagues, although sometimes they can feel a little threatened or intimidated and start questioning you and noticing that, oh, aren't you getting a bit too thin now? Isn't it time you stopped? And the sort of challenges that we may come across as we go through our journey and other people's opinions. But the feedback and the praise that you'll get from your trainer will be invaluable and will hopefully keep up that motivation for you. And then the final part of that is autonomy, so choice. So it's where you have the choice, first of all, to start on the journey towards achieving your goals, but then having choice of how you go about it. So it might be that you are offered a range of different meal plans, that you can choose the recipes that you like. It might be that you have different exercises that you prefer doing and you can pick from a suite, maybe running or weights or a mixture. It's just having that choice to do whatever is working for you, rather than being told, no, you must do 50 sit-ups and 50 press-ups and that's the way it's going to happen and that's how you'll get results. Because we're less likely to stick to it if that's how it's being brought to us. So all of those things will help you on your path to getting towards that intrinsic motivation, even if you have those initial thoughts of, I want to get something out of this, or I'm a bit scared that this is going to happen. As long as you've got those other three things in place, then that could be really helpful. And then whatever your motivation is, it's really important that you're actually ready to make a change and that the change is important to you and that you feel confident that you can do it. And as a coach, there's a really quick exercise that we do to sort of establish these levels with clients. So the first thing that we'll do is to think about the goal that you've got in mind. So whatever that may be, just have that goal in mind in front of you on a piece of paper, or just however you like to look at your goals. And then just ask yourself the three questions. So first of all, ask yourself if you're ready for change and score it. Give yourself a score between 1 and 10, with 1 being low and 10 being high. And then just make a note of that, and then we'll come back to it in a little bit. And then you do the same for how important the goal is to you. And then you do that again on a scale of 1 to 10, but at this point, it's important to think about why it's important. So what are you going to gain from achieving this goal? What will you lose? But also you can widen it out a little bit further than just what's going to happen to you. You can widen it out to what's going to happen for my family if I'm fitter and healthier, or how will this lighter mood impact my work? Will I be able to have better relationships with my colleagues because I'm feeling better in myself? So you can really dig underneath it and find out why this goal is important for you. And then finally, you can have a think about how confident that you are that you're going to achieve your goal. And again, it's the same process of scoring on a scale of between 1 and 10. So 1 being, no way, I'm not going to be able to manage this, to 10 being, yes, super confident, this is going to be easy, I've got this in the bag. So then you've got your goal and you've got your 3 scores. If you feel that you're quite low on the readiness score, then it's going to be quite likely that your motivation is also quite low. And that's going to be the most problematic one to actually keeping going and moving forward and overcoming those challenges when times get hard. So if that is the case, then you just need to take a little bit more time out to examine your motivation and really think about those elements of why you want to do this. And also reach out for support as you go along, because they'll all help you become more ready. And then also having to think about any barriers that are holding you back from being ready. We'll all have different things that have impacted us in the past, maybe even, you know, as far back as school times, being bullied, all things like that can be barriers which can hold you back. And then it's examining those, and it may be that you would need a bit more support with a coach or your PT to help you address those. But if you're low on readiness, there's going to be a reason for it, and it is something that we would really prefer you to address before really even you started off on the journey, so you're in the right place right at the beginning to move forward. And then if you don't feel confident that you're going to achieve your goal, then it may be that you just need to break it down into something smaller. So if you have said, for example, I want to be doing 50 press-ups a week, you can break that down. You don't need to have your goal straight away, like immediately, I'm going to do those 50. You could break it down to say, okay, this week I'm going to do 5 press-ups a day, and I'm going to do that every day without fail. And then the next week you can build it up, and then the week after build it up and build it up. And each time that you do this, every time you have one of those small wins, your confidence is going to grow and grow. And those feelings that you were having that you can't do it are actually going to switch, and you will be able to see and have evidence. You'll be able to actually say, well, no, I did do this. I did my 5 press-ups last week, so 10, piece of cake, you know, I've got this. And just build it up, and your confidence will grow over time. So with motivation, I feel like it's absolutely the foundation. So it's really worth spending some quality time on that and really thinking about it, so you can build for the future and really get to where you want to be. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is our wonderful ability to have less than helpful thoughts. And there are so many of these. I don't really have the time to go into every single unhelpful thinking pattern that we might have, but there were a few that I wanted to pick out that can derail our thinking when we're on a fitness or diet regime. So the first one is fortune telling, where we absolutely know exactly what's going to happen in the future. Oh, there's no way I'll do this. I will get 3 days in and then I'll fall off the wagon, so there's no point trying. Anything like that, where we're absolutely certain we know what's going to happen. And then we can also focus on the negative. So I know Donald has his own methods with weigh-ins and things, but for a lot of people that we coach, people become really fixated on the fact that the scales don't budge as much as they want them to. And it's a real problem. It's so demotivating. And they literally fixate on it. They can't move past it. So focusing on the negative is a real big one. Another one we come across, particularly in fitness, I think, is perfectionism. So where we tell ourselves that we absolutely have to be however many stones or kilos we want to be, or our body fat has to be at this particular percentage, otherwise it's all been for nothing and I'm a total failure. And then the final one that I do come across quite often is that we give ourselves permission to fall off the wagon. So we tell ourselves it's okay to treat ourselves to this. bar of chocolate, or we can skip this exercise session because our daughter's aunties, their cousin's niece fell off her bike and I feel a bit sad. So they're all of those areas, they're all problems that can really derail us from achieving our goals. But the good thing is, we don't have to believe those thoughts and we don't have to act on them. And in fact, what we can do is, first of all, become aware of them and then challenge and change them. So they're not set in stone. And there's 3 ways that we can do this. The first thing we can do is actually ask ourselves if the thought is true. And sometimes it might be. So in some cases, yes, it is true that the scales haven't moved. But then if you widen it out a little bit and ask yourself, but are the scales the only measure of success? Are they the only thing we need to be looking at? How else can we measure the change that's happening to you? Do your clothes feel looser? Do you feel better in yourself? Have you got more energy? Are you happier on a day-to-day basis? So not just looking at that one thought and just saying, yeah, that's absolutely true. We can broaden out the questioning and the things that we're asking ourselves to look at things a little bit differently. The other thing we can ask ourselves is if the thought is actually logical. So if we don't get to whatever percentage body fat that we want to get to, does that actually mean that we've failed? Has the loss of body fat today had no impact at all? Have there been any other benefits from losing this amount of body fat that we have so far? It's not logical that just because we've not hit that exact figure that we set ourselves, that we failed. It just means that we haven't quite got there yet. And adding that word is such a simple word, but adding a yet onto the end of a sentence can really make a huge difference. It gives you a lot more positivity and it doesn't feel like quite so much like the end of the road, and that you can still continue and you can still achieve. And the final way to question our unhelpful thoughts is to be pragmatic with them. So just asking ourselves, where is it going to get me if I do give myself permission to eat that chocolate or skip my exercise today? Is it going to help me achieve my goal? Or is it going to keep me fixed in a pattern that if I just fancy falling off the wagon, then I'll just give myself permission and then everything's fine? So it's just really going then back to that motivation. So if I give myself permission to skip this exercise, how is that going to help me move towards my goal? And our thoughts are really powerful, but learning to constructively argue with yourself can be really freeing. It can be slightly annoying sometimes because you actually start to question a lot of your thoughts, but it can really help you when you've got your goal set and you're trying to achieve something. So the last thing I wanted to share with you is how to prevent and deal with relapses. So when you have fallen off the wagon or you've skipped your exercise session. And the first thing I want to say, and possibly one of the most important things to say about this, is that failure is totally normal. It happens to everyone at some stage. It's highly likely when you're trying to achieve a goal that you're going to go on a really straight trajectory from where you were to where you want to be. It's more likely that you're going to be a bit up and down until eventually you get the up. And that's completely normal. So the more you normalize that, I think, the better. And when you understand that, you can prepare for it. So you then have the opportunity to have a think about what's gone wrong for you in the past. What's happened when you've had those dips? And then what have you done? What's your behavior been? And what strategies could you put in place for when you know it's going to happen again? So what do you know that you can do that will stop you doing it ahead of time? And the fact that you know it's going to happen, that you have a plan in place, will mean that you see it coming and it's not going to faze you. It's not going to feel like the end of the world. You'll just feel that, yeah, okay, I've seen this coming. I know what I've got to do. So let's crack on and do it. And then you'll be back on your forward trajectory. So as well as being aware of what's happened previously and preparing for it, you can also be aware of what's happening each day. And I do recommend spending a little bit of time each evening, just thinking about one thing that's gone wrong, or even one thing that's gone right in a day, and just seeing what can be learned from it. I do it with a little notebook, and I just have 3 columns, an A, a B and a C. And I begin with an A, which is at first. And in that column, I look at what was going on at the time in that particular situation. So, for example, I was working hard and feeling thirsty, and I needed to get a drink. Didn't have a lot of time, so I just wanted it to be quick and easy, get a drink and go. And then in the B column, B is for behaviour. So what did I do? On this occasion, I did what I always do. I went and put the kettle on and made a cup of tea. And then finally, the C is for consequences. So how did I feel after I'd done what I always do? Well, I felt bad because I knew I should have had a drink of water, ideally. I'm trying to drink the 2 litres of water a day. But I also felt warm and comfortable because tea is warm and comfortable, and I like it a lot. So when I do this exercise in the evening, it helps me think about what I could have done differently. So, for example, in my cup of tea situation, I could have had my herbal tea bags, my ginger and lemon tea bag, sitting next to my normal tea bags. So they're nice and easy to see, and they're just as easy to grab as a normal tea bag would be, and yet potentially better for me. One of my favourite things to do, particularly in this situation where the behaviour is formed out of habit, so I like to try and keep my brain on its toes. So I tend to go into my kitchen to make my tea through the same door. I go to the same cupboard, I go to the fridge, I do everything in the same order all of the time. And I do it on autopilot, don't even think about it. So because that habit is so ingrained, what I try to do now is just mix it up a little bit so my brain has to think. So I might on occasion walk into my kitchen backwards, or I might walk into my kitchen and just open random cupboards in random order. And it is fair to say that you do look a bit odd if you're caught in the act, but it does help stop that autopilot situation. So it's breaking that, it's a neuro pathway in your brain, and it's breaking that, it's giving it something else to think about. So it's a bit like, oh, okay, and maybe she's not going to automatically reach for the kettle this time, she's going to do something differently. So it's breaking that chain a little bit. And while I'm doing that and looking like a bit of a fool, I can get my act together and make sure that I've got my herbal teas ready and start creating new habits and new patterns that are a bit better for me. So the last thing I wanted to think about is cravings. And with nutrition being such a big part of fitness, these can be a real issue. I'm sure we've all noticed that as soon as we start to think about food, then that's really all we can think about. The craving intensity increases, and it's difficult to stop. So one quick exercise we can do to help with cravings is to make our brain multitask. We can give it 2 things to do. So as soon as you notice that a craving is kicking in, you can try to imagine that another non-food related object, something like maybe a rainbow, although maybe, I don't know, some people might say that might make them think of Skittles, so maybe not a rainbow, but just something that's completely irrelevant and doesn't relate to food at all. And try to imagine that, like make it from start to finish. So just however you would do it, just build it up gradually, gradually, gradually. And while your brain is doing that, then the power of your craving will reduce, and it will make that craving less intense, and then you're less likely to give in to it. It is one of those things that takes a bit of practice, but it does get easier over time for sure. So that's it for me. So just to summarize, I think the things that would be really useful to take away are to start, first of all, to examine your motivation and make sure that you know why you're doing what you're doing, because you'll always fall back on that. And then monitor and challenge your thoughts. and know that they're not all powerful. You can ask questions of them and you can change them. And also prepare to fail. It's totally normal. And if you do, you do, but have the strategies in place so that if you do, you can pick up and move forward again. And then finally, if you are struggling with cravings, try and keep your brain busy. So I hope you've enjoyed that quick talk and I've got something useful for it. And back to you, Donald.
To unmute myself, definitely. So I don't know about you guys, but I found that really, really interesting. As Roz said, there are some of those aspects kind of already built into the program. So we examine your motivation when you kind of first start. What you'll notice is when you have a conversation with me, I will always ask you, like, what are your goals? How important are they to you right now? And why now? Like, why are you starting now? Why has this become so important to you kind of recently? Just because, as she alluded to earlier on, if somebody's not in the right place to make a change, like, there's no point in me onboarding them onto this program, just because there is, as a lot of you know, there is a lot of change that happens very, very quickly in the beginning. And if somebody's not in the right headspace to be able to be accepting of change, like, it wouldn't be right of me to take their money and then ask them to be making all these changes. I thought how you said about the scrambling and people's habits. So when we are looking at nutrition and stuff, as you said, like, how many things happen on autopilot? Like, you go into the kitchen, you put the kettle on and you reach for a biscuit just because it's there and the tin's right next to it. So how easy would it be just to, like, scramble that pattern of when you go into the kitchen, if you spun around 3 times, your brain's probably not going to reach for that biscuit, just because something as simple as that is just going to break that habit cycle. And when people become aware of those habits, because we're bringing their attention to them, that's when they can then obviously make some changes. And I'd not heard that final point about when you get cravings, well, make something inanimate and try and build it in your mind. Like, I'm probably going to try and utilize that during prep, just because cravings get ridiculous when you're kind of that low. So obviously, before we go, if you guys want to, I can't unmute you, I can only mute you. If you guys want to kind of, like, unmute yourself, does anybody have any questions that they want to ask Roz while she's here? I'm not sure. There we go, unmute.
Yeah, I've unmuted Donald.
Perfect.
I found it really interesting, the going into the kitchen piece, something that I can't do at work, but for me, it's how can I apply that to my work environment, and the craving piece as well. I work, for your information, Roz, I work in a cake factory.
Okay, a tough one.
Because of the nature of the work that I do, I constantly have cake and chocolate around me.
Yeah.
So that is quite difficult to manage. And the guilt piece around, yeah, just one will be fine, but you never stop at one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think the first thing, working in a cake factory, there's so many things there. I think maybe one thing wouldn't quite do it, because it's not just seeing it, is it? You're going to be smelling it all the time as well. So maybe you might need to approach it from a whole range of different ways. So it could be something like, oh, I don't know about chewing gum, but maybe having a Vicks or something under your nose, or just something to disrupt the smell of it as well. I think taking regular breaks and making sure that you are perhaps eating in those breaks, so you know it's not hunger, so you can argue with yourself then, so you know that I don't need cake because I'm hungry, I'm just needing it because it's here all around me. But I think working in that environment is going to be a huge challenge. So trying to do whatever you can to disrupt the thoughts and the smell of cake is really difficult. And just trying to do what you can. Something minty or something that you don't like, that you can pull out on occasions when you're in that situation. I think you just have to try various things and see what worked for you, Gail, to be honest.
No, that sounds
with that. Yeah. And yeah, walking in a kitchen at work doing twizzles and things would probably be a bit awkward. But maybe it's something simple that I don't know if you have like fixed breaks. But it's just breaking the routine. So perhaps it's when you have your break, if you automatically walk and go into the kitchen, perhaps walk outside for even just a minute and just take some deep breaths and fresh air, and then go into the kitchen. So just breaking that chain somehow.
Yeah, no, that sounds
could be helpful.
Mark, do you want to ask any?
Any questions from Paul or Emma? Obviously, I can't see you on the cameras, so no, nothing coming through. Oh,
no, not from me. But thank you. That was interesting.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for listening.
Amazing. So yes, thank you for all your time tonight, Roz. I know you are very, very busy. And for the guys that managed to kind of jump on, I am going to try and get more guest speakers to kind of come in and cover some different subjects where, like, I know like the basics of a lot of this stuff, but someone like Roz, who is a specialist like in this area, just means that her level of knowledge is going to be kind of on a whole another level. So Roz actually works privately as a psychologist as well. So do you want to tell everyone kind of like where they can find you if they want to, if they think of questions at a later date and they want to come and drop you a DM?
Yeah, absolutely. Or I can pop a post in the Facebook group if that's helpful with, with details and things. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. Yeah,
no problem. So yeah, thank you for all your time tonight, this evening, guys. And obviously it's check-ins tomorrow, or some of you have had them today. It's check-ins tomorrow, and I will speak to you all again very, very soon. And yeah, thank you for all your time. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the weekend if I don't speak to you beforehand.